Guys, welcome to a new video. Today we're going to learn about unit 1.3, which is features of organisms. The point 1 is list the features in the cells of all organisms limited to cytoplasm, cell membrane, and DNA as a genetic material. There are a few points that I listed, and those are the points that are going to come in. Those are the things that you have to memorize for the O-level exam. So the first thing is cytoplasm. Cytoplasm, 3 points you have to memorize for the exam are that cytoplasm is a site of the cell's reactions. It's a clear jelly-like substance, and lipids and proteins are suspended in it. Proteins is enzymes, and these lipids and proteins are used to make cell structures such as membranes. Okay. Cell membrane. The definition of a cell membrane is, like, the few points you have to learn about it is that that it holds the cell's contents together. It controls which substances enter or leave the cell, and it maintains the structure and chemical reactions of the cytoplasm. Okay. DNA is the only thing you need to know for DNA is that it's the genetic material. Okay, that's the first point done. That you have to memorize it really well. And the 3 things you have to write are cell membrane, cytoplasm, and DNA. That's for the first point. Okay, first point is done. Now, list the features in the cells of all living organisms limited to ribosomes for protein synthesis and enzymes involved in respiration. The only things you have to write are the ribosomes. The 1 point is where proteins are synthesized, and enzymes that it's involved in respiration. You memorize these 2 things, and the 2 things you write on the separate notebook are ribosome and enzyme. And make sure to revise the previous points that you made. Okay, that is the second point completed. Okay, list the main features used to place animals and plants into the appropriate kingdoms. You should really write this table down because it's very important, and it's basically a little summary of everything. The main features used to place organisms into groups within the animal kingdoms, limited to the main groups of vertebrates, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. What they want is the features, which are cold. They are either cold or warm-blooded. Their method of breathing, the way they move, like the method of movement, or like how they move, their body. So like that they have extra features like scaly skin or moist skin. Their method of fertilization, whether it's external or internal. External means that like it's not like the female lays the eggs and then the male sheds the sperm, and internal is that the organs that happens inside the female. So the sperm just goes inside the female and meets the eggs, the female's ovary. Eggs, or that whether it has a shell or no shell, or just how their eggs are laid, or the texture of the eggs. Those are the features you need to know. What I did, I wanted to be more prepared for the exam, so I also wrote what each one was. So F is for fish, A for amphibians, R for reptiles, B for birds, and M for mammals. C is cold-blooded, and W is warm-blooded. So just remember that fish, amphibians, and reptiles are all cold-blooded. So the first 3 are cold-blooded, and birds and mammals are warm-blooded. Cold-blooded and warm-blooded is like, so cold-blooded basically just means that their temperature, it varies according to the temperature of the environment. But for birds and mammals, the warm-blooded is basically that the temperature does not vary. It stays constant no matter what temperature, no matter the temperature of the environment. So breathing, fish and amphibians use gills, And actually fish use gills, and amphibians like frogs, when they're young they use gills, like tadpoles use gills, and when they're adults they use lungs. But reptiles, birds, and mammals, they all use lungs. Movement for fish is fins. Amphibians, it's 4 legs. Reptiles, it's 4 legs, except snakes. Obviously, snakes don't have legs. And then birds, 2 scaly legs and 2 wings. And mammals is 4 limbs, like us. Mammals like us, basically, we have 4 limbs. We can use our 2 hands and 2 legs. And like bears can use their 4 limbs for movement, and then they can eat with their 2 hands. Body for fish, there's overlapping scaly skin, there's streamlined body, and sensory lateral line. These are the 3 things you have to memorize. Well, I have to memorize because I want to be extra prepared. Amphibians, they have moist skin without scales. Reptiles have dry, waterproof skin and scales. Birds have feathers and a beak. And mammals have hairy skin, whiskers, ear pinnae, and mammary glands. Fertilization for fish and amphibians, it's external, while reptiles, birds, and mammals have internal fertilization. Eggs for fish are there's no shell, but there's a protective jelly, and it's laid in water. That is for fish and amphibians. So this is for both fish and amphibians. And what fish usually do is like, that's like a side note, but they reproduce like millions of eggs, and they lay thousands or millions, I don't really remember, but thousands or millions of eggs, because usually, and only a few get laid because many of the sharks or other organisms, they eat the eggs by mistake. And reptiles, they have a hard shell laid on land, and so are birds, but in mammals, young develops in mother. Okay, just memorize that and it'll be really easy for you. Actually, wait. Oh my god. Oh god. Okay, that's for later. Okay, so that's done. Okay. That's this part done. That was a mistake by me. Apologize. Okay, that's this point done. So point 4 is done. Okay. Okay, now I'm gonna do point 3. Okay, list the main features used to place animals and plants in the appropriate kingdoms. Okay, so animals and plants in the appropriate kingdom. So there are 5 kingdoms, and so these are the 5 kingdoms. Okay, and so prokaryote, protoctist, fungi, plantae, and animalia. And the prokaryote is unicellular and it doesn't have a nucleus. Protoctist, it's both unicellular and multicellular. There's some uni and some multi. The uni are either protophyta or protozoa. Protophyta is basically, it has pH in it, that's what I remember. pH, like P, just basically reminds, like protophyta, pH, it just reminds me of a plant. Proto, both of them have proto, but phyta, it has a P, so plants. And that is chlorella, and that is that's an autotroph, so it makes its own food. Protozoa, it's an animal, and it's amoeba, and it's not an animal, but it's a heterotroph. So protophyta, it's an autotroph, it makes its own food, and protozoa, it's a heterotroph, so it ingests other food. Fungi, it's multicellular except yeast. Plantae, it's multicellular, and they are autotrophs, so they make their own food. Animalia, it's multicellular, and they are heterotrophs, so they ingest other food. Okay, this point is done. And okay, so this point now, we finished it earlier. And main groups of arthropods, we're doing this now. Okay.